The crystal chamber floated high above the gas giant. Inside, representatives from hundreds of alien species sat in a giant circle. Some looked like floating lights, others resembled walking rocks. A few were clouds of gas contained in special suits. They all stared at one human standing in the center. Ambassador Daejo Kim stood alone. His silver hair reflected the chamber's blue light. He wore a simple black suit from Earth. His face showed no fear. He had known this day would come. Belshara rose from her seat. She was the Senate Arbiter, a being made of living crystal that had existed for thousands of years. Her voice echoed through the chamber like music played on glass. Humanity stands accused, Valara announced. You have broken our laws. You built colonies in forbidden zones. You created weapons beyond your level. You refused to share your research with us. Daisho cleared his throat. Those zones were empty. No one lived there. Our weapons are only for defense and our research is our own. That is not for you to decide, a reptilian council member hissed. The Senate makes all decisions. We followed every rule we agreed to, Daejo said calmly. The rules you added later, without asking us. We did not agree to those. Belshara's crystalline form pulsed with light. Silence. The Senate has decided. We vote now. Lights appeared above each representative. Red for guilty, green for innocent. One by one, red lights filled the chamber. Not a single green light appeared. 847 species voted against humanity. Humanity is exiled, Veller declared. You will leave galactic space immediately. You will travel beyond the outer rim. You cannot return for 500 years. All your ships must leave within 30 days. The chamber erupted in cheers from many species. Others remained silent. A few looked uncomfortable, but none spoke against the judgment. Daejo bowed slightly. We understand. Humanity will comply with your decision. As he walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoed in the vast chamber. Near the door, he passed Captain Bowman Park, who commanded Earth's diplomatic ship. Bowman stood at attention in his military uniform. His face showed nothing, but his eyes met Daejo's for just a moment. That brief glance said everything. They both knew the truth. The Senate thought they were punishing humanity. They thought exile would stop human expansion. They believed they had solved their problem. They were wrong. Outside the chamber, Daejo and Bowman walked together toward their ship. Other aliens moved away from them as if exile was contagious. They really don't know, Bowman whispered. No, Daejo replied quietly. They never suspected. They were too busy watching our ships near their borders. They never looked beyond the outer rim. How long until we reach the others? 3 weeks to the Terminus Gate, then another month to Sanctuary. By then, everyone will know about the exile. Bowman smiled grimly. Will they panic? Some will, but most will understand. This is what we prepared for. They reached their ship. The vessel looked small compared to the massive alien cruisers around it, but appearances meant nothing. Inside its hull were technologies the Senate had never seen, systems they didn't know existed, weapons they couldn't imagine. As the ship left the station, Daejo looked back at the crystal chamber one last time. Belshara probably felt satisfied now. The Senate likely believed they had saved the galaxy from a dangerous species, but humanity had been planning for 40 years. They had built in secret. They had spread in silence. They had prepared for every possibility, including this one. The Senate thought they were exiling a small, troublesome species with perhaps 2 billion people and a few hundred ships. They had no idea about the colonies. They didn't know about the hidden worlds. They couldn't imagine what humanity had become. Bowman sat in the captain's chair and activated the communication system. Send the message. Code Exodus. Tell everyone to begin the retreat. Yes, sir, the communications officer replied. And the colonies beyond the rim, tell them to stay quiet. Stay hidden. Continue building. We'll be home soon. Daejo moved to the window and stared at the stars. Somewhere out there beyond where Senate sensors could reach, 200 worlds waited. Millions of humans lived and worked on planets the Senate didn't know existed. Shipyards built vessels in secret. Factories produced weapons and tools. Scientists researched without restrictions. They exiled us too late, he said softly. Bowman nodded. By decades, maybe by a century. When we return, everything will be different. If we return, Bowman said, we might not need to. Daejo smiled. True, but we will return. Not as beggars asking for permission. We'll come back as equals or perhaps something more. The ship jumped into hyperspace, leaving the Senate space behind. Behind them, the galactic powers celebrated their victory. Ahead of them, an empire waited that would change everything. The exile had begun. But for humanity, it was not a punishment. It was an opportunity, and the Senate would learn that lesson far too late. 3 weeks passed quickly. Now, thousands of human ships gathered at the terminus gate. This massive structure marked the edge of galactic space. Beyond it lay uncharted territory that the Senate called the Outer Rim. Admiral Yuna Shin stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Indomitable. She was 58 years old, with short gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Around her ship, the fleet stretched in every direction. Colony vessels carried families. Transport ships held supplies. Military cruisers provided protection. Senate enforcer ships surrounded the human fleet. They made sure no one tried to stay behind. Their weapons were powered up and ready. They wanted humanity gone. "All ships report ready," her communications officer said. Yuna nodded. "Begin the exodus. Nice and slow. Let them think we're afraid." The first ships moved through the terminus gate. They activated their engines and jumped into hyperspace, disappearing one by one. The Senate ships watched carefully. Everything appeared normal. Everything looked like a defeated species retreating into darkness. But appearances lied. On a small survey ship near the back of the fleet, a young engineer named Minho Choi studied his screens. He was only 28, but already one of humanity's best systems analysts. His fingers moved quickly across the controls as data streamed in. "Interesting," he muttered. His supervisor leaned over. "What did you find?" "Energy signatures. Lots of them all throughout the outer rim." Minho pointed at his screen. "See these patterns? They match our technology, our power systems, our jump gates." "How many?" Minho smiled. "At least 200 distinct sources, maybe more. The Senate has no idea they're there." Meanwhile, on the Indomitable, Dr. Hana Lee worked in her laboratory. She was the fleet's chief scientist, a woman in her 40s, who had spent 20 years planning for this moment. Her screen showed a map of the outer rim, with hundreds of glowing dots. Each dot was a colony. Each colony had been built in secret over the past 40 years. The Senate never knew, because they never looked. They assumed space beyond their borders was empty. They were wrong. Hana studied the population numbers. Colony 01, established 40 years ago, now held 8 million people. Colony 047 had 4 million. Colony 198 had just reached 1 million. Altogether, more than 800 million humans lived beyond Senate space. She typed a message to Admiral Shin. "All colonies report stable. They're ready for the fleet's arrival." Yuna read the message and allowed herself a small smile. "Perfect. Everything is going according to plan." Hours passed. More ships jumped through the gate. The Senate enforcers grew bored. This was exactly what they expected. A slow, orderly retreat. No resistance. No tricks. Just defeated humans leaving forever. But those humans were not defeated. They were going home. On the last ship, preparing to jump, Captain Bombin Park sat in his command chair. He had been patient through all the Senate's inspections. He had smiled politely while they searched his vessel. He had answered every insulting question with calm professionalism. Now it was finally time to leave. "Ambassador Dejo, we're the last ones," Bowman said into his communicator. Dejo's voice came back steady and calm. "Then let's finish this performance. Are you ready for Phase 2? "More than ready. I've been ready for 20 years. "Good. Once we pass through, we can drop the act. The Senate will think they won. They'll celebrate their victory. They'll feel safe." "For how long?" Bowman asked. "As long as we need. 10 years? 20? However long it takes to become truly unstoppable." Bowman looked at the terminus gate ahead. Beyond it lay freedom. Beyond it lay an empire the Senate couldn't imagine. Beyond it lay humanity's future. "Jumping now," he announced. His ship leaped forward and vanished through the gate. Behind him, the Senate enforcers watched the last human vessel disappear. They powered down their weapons. Their job was done. The enforcer commander sent a message to the Senate. "All human ships have departed. The exile is complete. Galactic space is secure." Back on the Senate homeworld, Veller received the news. "Excellent. Humanity has been dealt with. We can return to normal business." The other council members agreed. They closed the file on humanity. They marked the issue as resolved. They never thought about humans again. For 2 weeks, The human fleet traveled through empty space. Then they reached the first colony, then the second, then the 10th. Ship after ship arrived at hidden worlds that bloomed with life. Admiral Yuna Shin stood on the bridge as they approached Sanctuary Prime, humanity's secret capital. The planet gleamed blue and green below. 5 other terraformed worlds orbited nearby. Massive space stations hung in orbit. Shipyards built new vessels. Defense platforms protected everything. "Welcome home," Dr. Hana Lee said softly beside her. Yuna nodded. "Home? A home the Senate doesn't know exists. An empire they can't imagine. A future they can't stop. What happens now? Now we build. We grow. We prepare. And when the time is right, we return to galactic space. Not as exiles begging forgiveness, as equals demanding respect." The fleet settled into orbit around their hidden worlds. The exodus was over. The Senate thought they had solved their problem. They had actually made it infinitely worse. They had given humanity time, space, and motivation to become something unprecedented. The exile had begun, but it was already too late to stop what came next. 6 months had passed since the exile. Admiral Yunishin stood in the observation deck of Sanctuary Station, looking down at 5 beautiful worlds. Each planet glowed with cities and farmland. Ships moved between them constantly. This was humanity's secret capital, 400 light-years beyond where Senate sensors could reach. Behind her, the door opened. Governor Taeyong Na entered. He was 54 years old and had governed Sanctuary Prime for 20 years. Most people in the Senate territories had never heard of him. Here, he was one of the most important humans alive. "Welcome home, Admiral," he said warmly. "It's good to see the fleet safely returned." Yuna shook his hand. "It's good to be back. Though I must admit I barely recognize the place. You've built 3 new orbital stations since I left. 3 stations, 2 new shipyards, and we've started terraforming our 6th planet." Taeyong smiled proudly. "We don't waste time out here." They walked together through the station. Everywhere Yuna looked, she saw progress, new construction, busy workers, ships being built. This place hummed with energy that Senate worlds had lost centuries ago. "Tell me the numbers," Yuna said. "I want to know everything." Taeyong pulled up a holographic display. "Currently, we have 237 colonies across 60 star systems. Total population is approximately 2.3 billion people. That's more than double what the Senate believes exists." Yuna studied the map. Each glowing dot represented a world where humans lived and worked. The Senate thinks we're just 2 billion scattered primitives. They have no idea. None at all, and they never will, as long as we're careful. They entered a conference room where others waited. Dr. Hana Lee was already there, along with several other important people. But the person who stood to greet them made Yuna pause. Research Director Ji Hung looked younger than his 46 years. His eyes sparkled with excitement as he activated another holographic display. This one showed technological diagrams that made even Yuna's experienced mind spin. "Admiral Shin, I have remarkable news," Jiho began. "While you were dealing with the Senate, we made several breakthroughs." "Show me." Jiho touched the display and images appeared. "First, our adaptive AI systems. The Senate banned this research, claiming it was too dangerous. We ignored them. Our AI can now coordinate fleets of ships better than any organic crew. It can predict enemy movements before they happen. It can manage entire planetary systems without human oversight." He changed the image. "Second, quantum computing networks. We've connected all our colonies through instantaneous communication. When you send a message from here, it reaches the furthest colony in seconds, not weeks." Another image appeared. "Third, and most important, autonomous manufacturing. We've created systems that build themselves. They mine resources, process materials, construct ships and stations, all without direct human control. Our industrial capacity doubles every 10 years. Yuna sat down slowly. "Doubles every 10 years? That's exponential growth." "Exactly." Jiho grinned. "The Senate grows slowly, adding maybe 2 or 3% per year. Their populations are stable. Their technology barely changes, but we grow faster every single year. In 40 years, we've done what takes them 4 centuries. Dr. Hana Lee spoke up. "It's not just quantity, Admiral. It's quality. Our ships are better. Our weapons are more advanced. Our people are healthier, better educated, more motivated." "Why?" Yuna asked. "What makes us so different?" "Freedom," Taeyong answered. The Senate restricts everything. They control what you can research. They limit what you can build. They decide which planets you can settle. We have none of those restrictions. If someone has an idea, they can try it. If it works, everyone benefits. If it fails, we learn and try again. Jiho nodded enthusiastically. The Senate thinks their rules create stability. Really, their rules create stagnation. They haven't had a major innovation in 300 years. We have major innovations every decade. Yuna stood and walked to the window. Below, she could see construction ships building something new. Always building, always growing, always improving. How many ships can we build? She asked quietly. Right now, our shipyards can produce about 500 vessels per year. In 5 years, we'll double that. In 10 years, double it again. And the Senate's entire military. They have maybe 15,000 warships total, spread across 800 species. Most of those ships are old. Many are poorly maintained. Some haven't left dock in 50 years. Yuna turned back to face them. Her expression was serious. We need to be careful. The moment they realize what we've built, they'll try to destroy it. All of it. That's why we stay hidden, Taeyong agreed. For now, how long? Dr. Hana asked. How long do we hide? Yuna looked at each of them in turn. 20 years. Maybe less. We continue building. We continue growing. We develop technologies they can't match. And when we return to galactic space, we return as a force they cannot challenge. Return as conquerors. Someone asked nervously. No. Yuna's voice was firm. We return as equals. We offer partnership, not domination. But we make it clear that attacking us would be suicide. They exiled us thinking it would contain us. They gave us exactly what we needed. Time and space to become unstoppable. Jiho laughed. They tried to cage a tiger. Instead, they gave it room to grow into a dragon. Exactly, Yuna said. And when that dragon returns, the Senate will realize their terrible mistake. They exiled humanity, but they did it far too late. By the time they acted, we were already beyond their ability to stop. The meeting continued for hours. They discussed plans and strategies. They reviewed technologies and resources. They prepared for a future the Senate couldn't imagine. Outside the window, humanity's hidden empire grew stronger with every passing moment. 2 years had passed since humanity's exile. In the crystal chamber on the Senate homeworld, the Council of Five gathered for their monthly meeting. These 5 beings represented the most powerful species in the galaxy. They made the important decisions that affected hundreds of worlds. Valara floated at the head of the council table. Her crystalline body reflected the soft lights of the chamber. She felt satisfied. The human problem had been solved perfectly. Let us review the exile success, she announced. Intelligence Officer Ralvin, your report, please. Ralvin stood. He was a Rexian, a species that looked like 6-foot-tall lizards covered in dark green scales. His yellow eyes scanned his datapad as he spoke. The human signals beyond the outer rim have decreased significantly. We detect minimal communications. Their power signatures suggest they are consolidating on a few worlds rather than expanding. They appear to be struggling with the harsh conditions beyond our borders. Excellent, Belshara said. This confirms our predictions. Without access to our resources and technology, they cannot thrive. Counselor Thexara clicked her mandibles. She was a crash, an insectoid species with 4 arms and compound eyes. I have concerns, she said in her chittering voice. Speak, Velshara commanded. We have sent 12 exploration missions to map the outer rim. 7 have failed to return. Their last transmissions indicated nothing unusual, but then they simply vanished. Ralvin waved a clawed hand dismissively. The outer rim is dangerous. Navigational hazards are common. Asteroid fields, radiation storms, spatial anomalies. Losing ships in uncharted space is normal. 7 out of 12 seems excessive, Thexara insisted. It suggests we should avoid sending more missions to that region, Felchara said firmly. The outer rim is not worth the risk or expense. Let the humans struggle there alone. What they didn't know was the truth. Those 7 missing ships had indeed encountered something unexpected. But it wasn't asteroids or storms. It was human defense perimeters. Advanced sensors detected Senate vessels long before they arrived. Stealth ships intercepted them quietly. No weapons were fired. No violence occurred. The human ships simply manipulated the Senate vessels' navigation systems, sending them off course through carefully calculated jumps. The Senate crews never knew what happened. They jumped where their computers told them to jump. They ended up in empty systems far from human territory, confused but alive. By the time they found their way back, months had passed and their data was corrupted. Minister Quellen spoke next. He was a hydron, an aquatic species that lived in a suit filled with water. His voice bubbled through a translator. "I must report economic concerns. Continue," Valara said. "Several rare resources that humanity once provided are now scarce. Prices have increased by 30%. Some manufacturing sectors are experiencing delays. We have other suppliers." Another counselor said, "Yes, but they charge more and deliver less. The humans were efficient traders. Their absence is noticeable." Felshara considered this a minor inconvenience. The price of security. Better to pay more for resources than risk human expansion. The council members nodded in agreement. They saw the economic impact as acceptable. They didn't realize that those resources hadn't disappeared. Humanity was still mining them, still processing them, still using them. They just weren't sharing anymore. Every ton of rare metal stayed within human territory, building human ships and stations. "Any other concerns?" Belshara asked. Silence filled the chamber. "Then I declare the human exile a complete success. They have been contained. They pose no further threat. We may close this matter permanently." The council voted. 5 hands, claws, and appendages rose in agreement. The decision was unanimous. The file on humanity was marked as closed, resolved, finished. After the meeting, Ralvin returned to his office. Despite what he'd said in the council chamber, something bothered him. He pulled up the data on the missing ships. Their disappearances followed a pattern. They all vanished in the same general region. They all reported normal conditions right before losing contact. It was too coincidental, too neat. But when he tried to investigate further, his requests for more missions were denied. The Senate didn't want to waste resources on empty space. He sat back in his chair and stared at his screens. Something was wrong. He could feel it, but without evidence, he could do nothing. Far beyond the outer rim, in a control room on Sanctuary Station, a young technician named Yuri Han monitored Senate communications. He watched as the Council of Five closed humanity's file. He listened as they declared victory. He smiled and sent a message to Admiral Shin. "They think we're beaten. They've stopped watching us. Phase 3 can begin." Yuna received the message and showed it to her senior staff. "The Senate has given us everything we need. Time, freedom, underestimation. Now we accelerate our plans." "How long until we're ready?" someone asked. 16 years, maybe 18. We continue building ships. We continue expanding colonies. We continue developing weapons and technology. And when we return, we'll be so strong that they'll have no choice but to accept us as equals. Back in Senate space, Veller floated in her private chambers. She gazed at the stars through a massive window. She felt pleased with herself. The human threat had been neutralized without bloodshed. The galaxy was stable. Her legacy was secure. She had no idea that out in the darkness beyond where her sensors could reach, humanity was building an empire. They were developing technologies that would make Senate science look primitive. They were growing stronger every single day. The Senate had closed the file on humanity, but humanity's story was just beginning. The exile that was meant to contain them had instead freed them. And by the time the Senate realized their mistake, it would be far, far too late. The trap had been set. The Senate had walked into it willingly. Now they would wait, blind and satisfied, while humanity prepared to change the galaxy forever. 18 years had passed since the exile. A Senate patrol ship drifted near the terminus gate, monitoring the border as they had done countless times before. The crew was bored. Nothing ever happened here. Humans had been gone for nearly 2 decades. Then the sensor screamed. "Captain," the sensor officer shouted. Massive energy readings. Multiple jump signatures. "How many ships?" the captain asked, moving quickly to the display. "Hundreds. No, thousands. They're still coming through." Space itself seemed to tear open. Ship after ship emerged from hyperspace. Massive warships, sleek cruisers, enormous carriers. The fleet kept coming, spreading across the border in perfect formation. "Identify them," the captain ordered. "Signatures match human technology. But Captain, the power readings are off the scale. These ships are far more advanced than anything in our database." The captain felt ice in his stomach. Send an emergency alert to Senate Command. Tell them humanity has returned. At the center of the human fleet, Admiral Yuna Shin sat in her command chair. She was 76 years old now, but her mind remained sharp. Around her, the bridge of the Unity hummed with activity. This ship was 10 times larger than the old Indomitable. Final count: 5,000 warships, 2,000 colony vessels, 3,000 support craft, her executive officer reported. Good, Yuna said. Captain Sora Huang, are you ready? On a smaller ship at the front of the fleet, Captain Sora Huang smiled. She was 33 years old and had never seen Senate space before. She was born in the Hidden Empire, trained in their thermes, and ready for this moment. Ready, Admiral. Beginning broadcast now. Her message went out on all frequencies. Every Senate ship and station within range received it. Every planet with communications equipment heard her words. This is Captain Sora Huang of the human fleet. 18 years ago, the Galactic Senate exiled our people. We accepted your judgment and departed peacefully. Now, our exile period is complete. We return to galactic space. We come in peace, but we will not be denied. We request immediate discussions with the Senate Council. On the Senate homeworld, chaos erupted. Shara was pulled from her meditation chamber by urgent messages. The Council of Five assembled in minutes instead of the usual hours. They stared at the displays showing the human fleet in complete shock. Impossible, Belshara whispered. Where did they get so many ships? The fleet size rivals our entire military, Ralvin said, his scales pale with fear. This is more ships than we believed they possessed before the exile. How many humans are there? Counselor Thexar clicked nervously. We estimated 2 billion, Ralvin replied. But if they can field a fleet this size, our estimates were clearly wrong. Velshara tried to maintain her composure. Open communications. I will speak with them. A hologram appeared. Ambassador Kyunggu Lee stood before them, dressed in formal diplomatic attire. He was 48 years old and had been trained by Daejo Kim himself. He bowed respectfully. Honored Senate members, I am Ambassador Kyung Sui. I represent humanity in these discussions. You were exiled for 500 years, Belshara said coldly. You return after only 18. This is a violation of Senate law. With respect, we fulfilled the spirit of your judgment. You exiled us to remove us from galactic affairs. We departed. We built our own civilization. Now we return. Not as the species you exiled, but as something new, something you must recognize. What do you want? Ralvin demanded. Kyung-Su's expression became serious. Full Senate membership, recognition of our territorial claims, beyond the outer rim, removal of all technology restrictions, a permanent seat on your council, which will become a council of 6. The chamber exploded with outrage. Counselor shouted. Felchara's crystal form flashed angry red. This is blackmail, she declared. You threaten us with your fleet. We offer partnership, Kyunggu replied calmly. Our technological advances, our resources, our knowledge in exchange for equal treatment. And if we refuse, Kyunggu's face remained neutral. Then we will remain at your borders. We will establish defensive positions. We will not attack, but we will not retreat. We hoped for peace. We prepared for both outcomes. Belshara cut the transmission. She looked at her fellow counselors. They are bluffing. We send the Grand Fleet. We force them back beyond the rim. Are you certain? Thura asked nervously. Their fleet is larger than we expected. Size means nothing without experience. Our forces have maintained order for 1,000 years. These humans have been hiding in the dark. They will crumble before our power. Back on the Unity, Admiral Shin received word of the Senate's decision. She had expected this, hoped it wouldn't come to this, but prepared for it anyway. They're mobilizing their Grand Fleet, her intelligence officer reported. 10,000 ships heading toward the Nexus Junction. Yuna nodded slowly. Then we show them why exile came too late. All ships move to defensive positions. Prepare for engagement. No lethal force unless absolutely necessary. We disable. We don't destroy. Show them we're superior without proving we're monsters. Yes, Admiral. The human fleet spread across the border systems like a net. They didn't advance into Senate base. They didn't attack. They simply waited, blocking every major hyperspace route. Ships couldn't enter or leave Galactic Core without passing through human-controlled space. It was a blockade, peaceful, but absolute. And the Senate finally began to understand that the humans who returned were not the same ones they had exiled. These humans were ready for whatever came next. 3 months after humanity's return, the standoff continued. Human ships controlled the borders. Senate trade routes were blocked. Frustration grew on both sides. Finally, the Senate decided to act. The Grand Fleet assembled at Nexus Junction, the most strategic point in galactic space. 10,000 warships from 20 different species gathered together. It was the largest military force the Senate had assembled in 200 years. Fleet Admiral Keith, a massive terravorn whose body resembled living stone, commanded the operation. He studied the tactical display. Only 200 human ships guarded Nexus Junction. The Senate forces outnumbered them 50-1. "This will be quick," he rumbled. "All ships prepare to advance. We break through their line and force them back to the outer rim." On the human side, Commander Yunji Bei watched the Grand Fleet approach. She was 36 years old and had trained her entire life for this moment. She commanded a tactical wing of 200 ships against an enemy 50 times larger. She smiled. "All ships activate full combat AI. Link all systems. Begin predictive analysis." Across her fleet, computers connected. Hundreds of AI systems merged into one massive intelligence. It calculated thousands of possible futures. It predicted enemy movements before they happened. It coordinated 200 ships as if they were one organism. The Senate fleet advanced. 10,000 ships moved forward in standard attack formation. It was a formation they had used successfully for centuries. The human ships scattered. They run. Kithra laughed. "All ships pursue. Don't let them escape." But the humans weren't running. They were repositioning. Each ship moved to a precisely calculated position. They created a three-dimensional web around the Senate fleet. "Fire," Yunji said calmly. Energy beams lanced out from every human ship. But these weren't destructive weapons. They were disabling weapons. Each beam targeted specific systems on Senate ships. Engines shut down. Weapons went offline. Communications failed. The beams were so precise they didn't damage the hull or hurt the crew. They just stopped the ships from functioning. Within minutes, 1,000 Senate ships floated dead in space. "Impossible," Keith roared. "All ships return fire." The Senate ships tried. They targeted the human vessels and fired. But the human ships weren't where they expected. The AI had predicted every targeting solution. Every human ship moved exactly 1 second before weapons fired at their position. It was like trying to hit smoke. Another wave of disabling beams struck. 2,000 more Senate ships went dark. "Retreat," Keith ordered. "Fall back." But the human net was complete. As Senate ships tried to flee, they found human vessels perfectly positioned to intercept. Each escape route was blocked. Each tactical decision was predicted and countered. 4 hours after the battle began, the entire Grand Fleet floated helplessly. 10,000 ships, not destroyed, not damaged, just disabled. Their crews were safe, but their ships were useless. Yunji opened a communication channel to all Senate vessels. "Your crews are unharmed. We will restore your ship functions in 6 hours. This demonstrates that we could have destroyed you, but chose not to. Remember this when you report to your Senate." The message was clear. Humanity possessed overwhelming superiority, but showed restraint. They could kill, but chose to disable. They could conquer, but offered partnership. On the Senate homeworld, the Council of Five watched in horror. Their entire military had been defeated, without a single casualty. The humans had demonstrated technology generations ahead of their own. Then a new transmission arrived. It came from Sanctuary Prime. Deep in the Outer Rim, an elderly man appeared on their screens. His name was Dr. Ji Hong, and he had a message for the galaxy. "I am Research Director Ji Ho Kang. I have led humanity's scientific advancement for 40 years. You believe you know us? You don't. Let me share the truth." A holographic map appeared behind him. It showed not 200 colonies, but 482. Not 60 star systems, but 90. Not 2 billion humans, but 6.7 billion. Everything you believed about humanity was wrong. You thought exile would limit us. Instead, you freed us from your restrictions. You thought we would struggle. Instead, we thrived. You thought you knew our capabilities. You knew nothing. He showed them images of the hidden empire. Massive shipyards that built vessels faster than any Senate facility. Terraforming projects that turned dead rocks into living worlds in decades. Research stations developing technologies the Senate had never imagined. You gave us 18 years in exile. We used every moment. While you maintained traditions, we innovated. While you enforced stability, we evolved. While you rested on ancient achievements, we created new ones. Ja's expression became serious. You thought exile would contain us. You were wrong. You exiled us when it was already too late. For 40 years before that judgment, we had been preparing. We knew your restrictions would eventually force this choice. So we built in secret. We expanded in silence. We prepared for this day. Now we return, not as the species you exiled, as something far greater. We offer partnership. We offer our technology, our resources, our knowledge. In exchange, we demand respect. We demand recognition. We demand equality. You have seen what we can do. We defeated your grand fleet without harming a single crew member. This restraint is a gift. It proves we seek peace, not conquest. But make no mistake, if you force us to fight, we will win decisively, completely. The transmission ended. Across galactic space, trillions of beings processed what they had learned. The humans were not a minor species anymore. They were a superpower, and they had become one in secret, right under the Senate's nose. In the crystal chamber, Shara floated in silence. She finally understood. The exile hadn't been too harsh. It had been too late. Humanity had been preparing for 50 years. By the time the Senate acted, humans were already beyond containment. We made a terrible mistake, she whispered. Yes, Ralvin agreed. We underestimated them. We tried to contain something that was already unstoppable. The question now is, what do we do about it? Felchara looked at the display showing the disabled Grand Fleet. 10,000 ships helpless, and humanity had done it with just 200 vessels. The power difference was overwhelming. We negotiate, she said quietly. We give them what they ask for, because we have no other choice. 6 months had passed since the battle at Nexus Junction. The Galactic Senate chamber looked different now. New seats had been added. The circle of power had expanded. The ancient structure that ruled the galaxy for millennia was changing. Representatives from 800 species gathered for the signing ceremony. At the center table, 6 beings sat instead of 5. Velshara occupied her traditional position. Beside her sat Ambassador Kyonggu Lee, representing humanity on the newly formed Council of 6. The Treaty of Coexistence lay before them. It was a document that changed everything. Humanity gained full Senate membership. All their territories beyond the Outer Rim were officially recognized. Technology restrictions were permanently removed. Most importantly, humans now had an equal voice in galactic decisions. Are we ready? Belshara asked quietly. Kyonggu nodded. We are. One by one, the counselors placed their marks on the treaty. Signatures, claw prints, energy stamps. Each one represented acceptance of the new reality. When the last mark was placed, the chamber erupted in mixed reactions. Some species cheered, others remained silent. A few looked worried about the future. After the ceremony, Admiral Yuna Sheen prepared for her final public address. She stood before the assembled Senate, wearing her formal uniform. At 76 years old, this would be her last official act before retirement. Honored representatives, she began, her voice strong despite her age. 18 years ago, you exiled my people. You feared what we might become. You tried to contain our ambitions. You believed isolation would limit us. She paused, looking around the chamber. You were right to fear us, but not for the reasons you believed. You thought we were aggressive, expansionist, dangerous. The truth is different. What makes humanity dangerous is not aggression. It is adaptability. We adapt to any environment. We overcome any obstacle. We solve any problem. You gave us the ultimate challenge when you exiled us. You sent us to empty space with nothing but our ships and our determination. And we thrived. We built worlds where there was only rock. We created life where there was only death. We developed technologies you thought impossible. We did all of this because we had to, because that is what humans do. We adapt, we survive, we excel. Yuna's expression softened, but we do not seek dominance. We seek partnership. Everything we have learned, we will share. Our terraforming techniques can help other species colonize new worlds. Our medical advances can cure diseases. Our technologies can improve lives across the galaxy. You tried to contain our potential through exile, but potential cannot be contained. It can only be channeled. We channel ours toward cooperation, toward mutual benefit, toward a stronger galaxy for all species. She looked directly at Valara. You made a mistake 18 years ago, but that mistake taught us both valuable lessons. You learned that fear-based decisions often backfire. We learned that isolation can be an opportunity rather than a punishment. Today, we move forward together, not as enemies, not as master and subject, as equals, as partners in building a better future. The chamber remained silent for a moment. Then, Valara stood. Her crystalline form pulsed with soft light as she spoke. Admiral Shin speaks wisdom. We of the Senate made errors in judgment. We acted from fear rather than understanding. We tried to limit humanity's potential instead of embracing it. The exile was our mistake. But perhaps it was a necessary mistake. It forced both our peoples to grow. Humanity grew in capability. We grew in wisdom. Now we stand together stronger for the lessons learned. She turned to address the entire chamber. Let this day mark a new era. An era where potential is nurtured, not feared. Where different species work together rather than against each other. Where the galaxy benefits from cooperation rather than control. Applause filled the chamber. It started slowly but grew, until every representative joined. The sound echoed through the crystalline structure, a symbol of unity that would have seemed impossible 2 years ago. Later that day on Sanctuary Prime, a different ceremony took place. A monument was unveiled in the capital city. It showed a ship launching into space representing humanity's journey into exile. Behind the ship, stars formed the shape of an empire. Admiral Yunhin attended along with Governor Taiyong Nam, Dr. Hani, and Research Director Jiho Kang. The people who had built the hidden empire stood together one last time in official capacity. We did it, Hana said softly. We did. Yuna agreed against all odds. Despite every obstacle, we built an empire in secret and returned as equals. Jiho smiled. The Senate thought they were exiling a problem. They created a superpower instead. What happens now? Taiyong asked. Now we build again, Yuna said. Not in secret. This time openly, proudly. We show the galaxy what humanity can achieve when given freedom and opportunity. Among the crowd stood Captain Sora Huang and Commander Unji Bei. They represented the new generation, humans born in the hidden empire who never knew Senate restrictions. They were the future. Also present was Ambassador Kyonggu Lee, who would guide humanity's role in the Senate for decades to come. He watched the younger officers and felt confident. The future was in good hands. Near the back of the crowd, an elderly man stood with a young girl. Mino Choi, now 66 years old, held his granddaughter's hand. Her name was Essel Park, descendant of Captain Bowman Park, who had helped orchestrate the original Exodus. Grandfather, Isle asked, looking up at the monument. Why did they exile us? They were afraid of what we might become, Minho replied. Were they right to be afraid? Minho smiled. They were right to recognize our potential. Wrong to think exile would contain it. We became exactly what they feared, but also what they needed. Esau looked up at the stars visible in the afternoon sky. What do you see when you look at the stars, grandfather? Infinite possibilities, just like your great-great-grandfather Bowman always said. The galaxy is open to us now, not as exiles, not as supplicants, as equals, as partners, as builders of the future. The young girl smiled and looked at those distant stars with wonder. She was part of the first generation that would grow up in a galaxy where humanity was respected, where human potential was celebrated rather than feared, where cooperation replaced control. The exile had ended, not in defeat, but in triumph. Not in submission, but in partnership. The Senate had tried to contain humanity by sending them away. Instead, they had given humans everything they needed to become unstoppable. By the time the Senate realized their mistake, it was already too late. Humanity had adapted, survived, and thrived. And now they would help the entire galaxy do the same. The story of exile had become a story of triumph. The species that was cast out had returned stronger, and the galaxy would never be the same again.